Pretty much every tool you get has something like this. There are always necessary parts and pieces and accessories that you have to keep track of, but the manufacturers rarely give you a way to store them or organize them. Inevitably, we end up putting them in a cup or a box that fills up with sawdust just so we don't lose them, but I think we can do better. And I get it, adding another accessory to the box to organize all this stuff would just be extra cost for the manufacturer, but it's also a really great reason for you to get a 3D printer. Now, let's talk about these pieces specifically. I recently got the new metal fab from Xtool, and it's awesome. It's a laser welder, and a laser cutter, and a laser cleaner, and a CNC. And all these different parts are the necessary pieces that you have to use for each one of those functions. So it doesn't make sense to stick these in a box somewhere. This is for the laser cutter, and it's got a few different nozzles that you have to use for different types of cutting. If you want to use the cleaning function, you have to use one of these two tips, which go into this extension. And if you want to use welding, then you have to use that extension with this tip. Plus, you have this thing, which is just there to kind of keep dust out of stuff. On top of that, this is a laser, like a really powerful laser that's not in a box. It's in a gun that you can use in open space, so you have to wear laser safety goggles all the time. You don't want to lose these. Now, the tool itself is super well designed and well made, but it doesn't have any drawers and it doesn't have any little alcoves where you could drop all of these pieces in, but it does have this. This is the stand for the welding gun. It sits right here when you're not using it, which means everybody who has this tool is gonna have one of these. So rather than making a custom storage solution that works just for me, let's make something that works for everybody who has this tool. Now, obviously, if you don't have this tool, then you don't really care about how to handle these pieces, but the process for figuring out what to do with stuff and then doing it is exactly the same. And like I said before, every tool has stuff. And I already said that all this is gonna go on this stand, and I want the pieces to be on the outside perimeter so that the gun can be in the middle and the other stuff doesn't get in the way of it. But if it goes around the outside, that's actually a pretty big area, so I probably need to make it in pieces that can snap together or at least fit onto the existing stuff. Then we have to think about how to store each one of these pieces. These 4 pieces right here all have the same diameter kind of tube on the bottom. So we can make an acceptor that they all drop down into, they stand up, you can easily see them so you can find the one that you need. This tube is kind of long and doesn't really need to stand up, so we need to make a way to lay it down. This piece has a totally different set of sizes, so we'll just make its own custom little slot for it to drop into. And then this thing. This is all kinds of weird. The problem with something like this is that it doesn't really have a flat side, and so whichever way you lay it, it wants to lean, or it's gonna be laying on a part that's maybe fragile, there's a wire you have to protect. And so we just need to make sure that we find a way that we can set it in some sort of a little perimeter that it won't roll around and won't fall over. And then also we've got to find a place for these, but I don't think that's a big deal. Step 1 is to take measurements with calipers of all the pieces that you possibly can and write them down on a piece of paper. The first prototype is designed, but I guarantee you that this thing is not right, probably in a lot of different ways. And the only way to prove that and figure out what we need to fix is to make this in the real world so we can fit the pieces in it. Now, we could 3D print a really thin layer of that entire thing just to get the profile, but it's a profile, and a much faster, easier way to do that is using a laser cutter. It's certainly not right, but it's not as wrong as I was expecting. Now, the measurements are actually pretty close, but one of the most useful things you learn from any physical prototype is how things interact. Do you have enough space around something to pick it up? Do two things get in the way of each other when you try to put them away? And I actually learned quite a bit. For instance, this piece does fit and stand in one of those holes, but it's kind of top heavy, and unless that's really tight, it's going to be easy to knock over. So it would make more sense to store this piece like that. And this piece back here, it actually fits in the opening, but it's just a little too close to this. So if we move it up front, we have all of the small pieces up here. We've got enough space for both of these and some extra space in the back. Now luckily, all of those different shapes in Fusion can be moved around to create the new layout. Then I can get an updated two-dimensional profile, I can cut it and test it again. The two-dimensional part is actually pretty easy. The three-dimensional part is where we're gonna have more trial and error. This video is sponsored by Averon, who makes this treadmill, but it's not just any treadmill, it's a gamified treadmill. Not only can you take classes on this thing, you can play games, you can stream your favorite shows, and you can compete with yourself and with other people. Their products are all designed using game psychology backed by science to help you want to come back and exercise over and over so that you can improve your scores, improve your fitness, and compete with other people. There's a thriving community, there's lots of friendly competition, and it keeps track of all your exercise data so you can see all of that at a glance anytime, and you can see your progress over time. And this is way more than just a guided class, which they do have as well, but there's interactive games and immersive worlds that you can put yourself in on this giant screen while you're working out. As someone who's been a runner for a really long time and doesn't really like to spend a lot of time on the treadmill, this thing has made it fun again. I would love it if you would go check out the products from Averon. Like I said, they've got a treadmill, but they've also got a bike and a rower. If you use the QR code on screen or hit the link down in the description, you can go check out all their products and then use the code MakeStuff50. That's gonna give you $50 off anything they have. Be sure to go check them out, and huge thanks to Averon for sponsoring this video. After more than a couple of attempts, I think I got the profile. So each one of these pieces needs to be captured somehow. They either need to sit down in something or have something come up around them to hold on to them. But they're all different heights, and if I make something tall enough for this one, it's gonna be way too tall for this one. One option for this would be to print a giant thick pad with a bunch of holes in it so everything could just drop in, but there's really no reason to do that. What I need is a thin surface across the entire thing and then little islands or little walls to hold each one of the pieces. And every single one of those is a little bit different. And this is where coming up with different solutions for every specific piece may take a little more time, but it's gonna give you a better result. Here's a test I did when this first idea started. I made a little collar for these to sit into. And just having something that short is enough to hold that piece in place. But the same collar does not work for this. This cutter head does not have a flat surface on the bottom, so making it in this orientation doesn't work because there's nothing to stop it from rolling around. But if I were to try to put it like this on a flat surface, it doesn't work either because it's not balanced. My point is that a collar would work fine for something like this, but for this one, I need to have a shape that at least kind of matches the bottom profile so that it won't fall over. And with your tool or your situation, you're gonna have a bunch of different types of pieces that are gonna need probably unique solutions. You know, there's something you probably don't know about me and don't really care about, and that's the fact that I really dislike purple. I don't have a good reason. I don't know why. I've just always disliked the color, but you gotta use what you got. Speaking of, the first print is done. Now these look pretty much the same, except for obviously this one has 3 dimensions and this one only has 2, but they're actually a little bit different. And the difference is small, but it matters. See how much room there is around that I can move it back and forth? And then in here, it fits way better, almost too good. When you're designing a product or anything else, one of the many things you have to consider is how you're gonna end up making it, what manufacturing method you're gonna use. Now, this is a really good example of how printing and laser cutting have a very, very small difference that you have to account for. And that difference is based on like the mechanics of what's happening when something's being made. Let's first talk about a laser or a blade. They both have a kerf, which means if you want to cut this line, you have to remove everything up to that line. And depending on the method that you're using, it might remove a little bit more than you expect. And a 3D printer has the opposite problem. It's not cutting things away, it's actually pushing squishy plastic into space. And sometimes that means it's gonna expand a little bit, it's gonna overlap a little bit. And so you end up with maybe tighter spaces just from the nature of plastic. And it's gonna be different if you're using a laser or a blade. You just gotta account for it. Or if you're using a 3D printer or an injection molder. They're gonna be different and you just have to account for it. But this particular difference got me thinking. Now, if I'm gonna make this for myself, I'll probably 3D print it because I've got a printer big enough to make this piece, but not everybody with a printer can make something this big. Then also, not everybody has a printer. Some people have laser cutters. And if I adjust the numbers for this, the numbers won't work with this. So I can either make one thing for me, or I can do a little bit more work and make it available for lots of different people. That sounds better, let's do that. I've got a couple of things I gotta do to this before I start splitting it off into different manufacturing methods. One, I gotta move the glasses back. They're just too close. They don't need to be that close. The other thing is keeping it in place. It slides around, and I think double-sided tape on the bottom in between these two surfaces is probably the best way to do it, but I also got to thinking about some sort of a little clip-in overhang that goes all the way around. I just gotta make a decision there and adjust these numbers a little bit more, and then I can start figuring out how to split it out for the different ways to make it. So I'm fighting the urge to make this do something. Just the way I am when I design stuff, I like for it to do something, to have a thing, to have a moving part or an extra something, and honestly, this just needs to hold stuff. So I'm not gonna do that, I'm gonna leave it as is. But if you have any ideas, let me know in the comments. For the 3D printed one, I think it's pretty much done. I mean, I just have to print one more version of it just to make sure everything fits well, but it's pretty good to go. I ended up putting a split right down the middle of it so you could print the front and the back as separate pieces, then use some double-sided tape to stick it to the stand, and I think you'll be good to go. But for the laser cut one, I gotta think a little bit more about how to get the walls that are necessary for holding the pieces in place. Now this isn't difficult, I've already got all the shapes, and so all I need to do is offset those shapes a little bit bigger so that I can cut out some pieces to fit around the openings, and then make enough of those pieces to glue them and stack them up to make the walls of the right height. I think it's just trial and error. There you go, one 3D model led to two different ways to make the same thing depending on what tools you have available. That's one of the coolest things about making 3D models of your designs. Also, if you want to learn how to 3D model, I've got an online course that will teach you how to use Fusion. Link to that down in the description. Also, these files, if you want them, they'll be linked down there as well. Thanks for hanging out with me on this one. I hope it gave you an idea to make something for your shop to organize your stuff so you don't lose it. See you on the next one. Step one is to take measurements with calipers of the parts that you, of as many pieces as possible. Okay, first draft is done, and I guarantee you that this is not, thank you dogs, of this, so it will stay in, Speaking of, the first prints are done. The first print is done. Ah, so close. That was really, all right.